Well, good morning, everybody. I don't know if we're streaming or not. We're going to find out when Gen 4 gets here. But I'd like to welcome everybody to the Higher Education Study Committee. Today we have an agenda before us which involves input or insights we're going to try to obtain from both the Plymouth State University and from Keene State College. And I'd like to welcome Brian Walker and Tanya Sturts here. Jen, are we streaming? We are. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe what we ought to do is first thing we do today is just go around the table and everybody introduce themselves so that we know who we are. And Brian, why don't we start with you on the left-hand side? I always go left to right. I must be brought up in Canada, so it's the left-hand, you know.
My name is Brian Walker, State University. In that role, I serve as the licensure officer. I see our teacher education programs, basically to make sure that we're meeting state standards. State since 2012, but initially actually started with the state teacher certification program in Berlin. There until 2017, before transitioning to campus.
Put the microphone to it. Hit the red button.
So you have to start all over now. Okay.
Usually red means off. But it's great to be here, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Tanya Sturts. I am the director of Ed Prep at Keene State College and also chair of the education department. And so I oversee everything that has to do with education, from licensure, compliance, accreditation, and all those pieces. So, and it's funny, I was like, oh my God, I've been here since in New Hampshire. I'm not from New England. I've been up here since 2009, which Jay Kahn was at Keene State when I first started. So it timestamps how long I've been here. Thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome.
I'm Lou D'Alessandro, State Senator from District 20. That's the city of Manchester.
I'm Ruth Ward, Chair of the Senate Education Committee.
I'm Rick Ladd. I chair House Education. I've been here since 2008, not as long as Senator D'Alessandro by any shot, but been on the education all those years. My previous life was that of I started out after I graduated from UMaine and then got my master's there, but as an elementary teacher, then went on to become a elementary school principal, and then a principal / school administrator up in Alaska for 25 years, distinguished national principal. So education is what I like to talk about, and curriculum especially. So I think that's what our docket's about today. So go ahead, Professor Myler.
Mel Myler. I'm ranking Dem on the House Education Committee. I've been in the House now. This is my 6th term, and I'm the retired executive director of NEA New Hampshire.
Dave Luno, I'm a state rep from Hopkinton, Bow, and Concord, serve on the Education Committee, and served 12 years on the Hopkinton School Board.
We'll forgive him. He's an engineer, a graduate at MIT, but we'll forgive that. Shannon.
Hi, I'm Shannon Reed. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the Community College System of New Hampshire.
Mark Rubenstein, Community College System of New Hampshire.
Jay Kahn, former state senator, member of this committee for a couple of few years, and 28 years at Keene State College, and invited by the chair to come because I've been working as a board member for New Hampshire Civics and have an interest in the topics that the chairman's.
And that's one of our topics for today. So yeah, we'll have a discussion. And thank you all for coming. And Dr. Rubenstein, you're too, he's been president of Granite State College, now chancellor of the community college system. So I'm very pleased to have you here, Mark.
But not an MIT trained engineer.
Well, every committee needs just keep things going.
He's our spreadsheet analyst over here, so he helps us out a lot when it comes to education finance. So today we have an agenda here, and the first thing that I would like to do is that we've had, of course, this is Education Committee, and we deal with a lot of bills coming in that are curriculum oriented. We deal with the academic standards and the minimum standards for public school approval. And in our looking at academic standards, we oftentimes wonder, the state board sets those academic standards, and the schools then integrate those standards into the curriculum which they adopt and then they approve locally. We oftentimes are wondering, though, when we're looking at some of the outcomes that come out of the classes, we look at, and there's a lot of ways of having accountability. We have the statewide assessment here, but there's some numerous ways, as we all know, of being educators, how we can, ascertain whether a student has acquired that skills and knowledge and concepts which we want. But we are seeing things starting to slide a little bit, especially in mathematics, not just because of COVID, but they were sliding prior to that. For the last 10 years or so, we've seen the achievement scores not being where they are, and whether the achievement tests are measuring what we're teaching, I don't know. And whether we also know that there's a teacher shortage committee, which we have here, and that bill was put forth by Senator Khan last year, was it? Yeah, and Ruth is now, Senator Ward is now chairing that. And we're noticing that we have a shortage of teachers in science, mathematics, special education, and the and the technical areas. And that's where it really identifies itself. And so now we're looking at our curriculum, and we don't have we can only set up guidelines or frameworks on this level. It's up to the locals to adopt and put their curriculum together. But we want to today try to lean a little bit into what's going on at the higher education, post-secondary levels in terms of teacher preparation. And what being taught there, does it align with what we're doing in our schools? It's been a number of years since I've been there, so I really I don't have that information. And that's why we've invited, Brian and Tanya here today. And Dr. Rubenstein and Shannon, also from the community college system, I know you're engaged with teacher preparation programs as well. And those tie in with what we have been discussing in past years when we were looking at HB 1530, where the associate's degree just goes on and counts as those first 2 years you're coming as a junior. We identified 30 major areas in which it works. And so I believe in future meetings, we will be discussing that in terms of, is it working? I don't know. I've heard some places where it hasn't, especially when we're dealing with going into an engineering, a very specific degree area at the 4-year level. But getting back to the curricular areas, I'd like to now just open it up, if we can, please, if we can get an overview of the teacher preparation programs that are leading towards certification in our state here, K through 12, pre-K through 12, as well as, identifying specifically at what is being done at the elementary levels in some of this. I've met recently with teachers out in various school districts, in several districts now, and it seems that there's almost a disconnect between what's going on at the secondary level versus what's going on at the elementary level as far as working and aligning together and what the expectations are. What you're doing at the post-secondary level in terms of preparing our elementary teachers, trying to get into some of the areas like, are the skills and knowledge being taught aside from the pedagogical type methods? I know at the secondary level, if you're going to be teaching social studies, you have a background in history or government, civics, economics, geography. However, in the elementary, how well prepared are these teachers for the content? I know of methods. I brought in one of my old books, which I had for the teaching of math, social studies. That was written in 1984. And of course, that was the second edition. I had the first edition, which was written around 1970. And that was all, how to teach. It didn't say what to teach. And so maybe those are some of the things we can address a little bit. And I don't know who would like to go first, Tanya or Brian?
Right, go for it. Okay, so for our elementary education, I can speak specifically for Keene State. one of the things that we have kind of held on to, it is a public liberal arts, so we really value the liberal arts. And all of our elementary majors are dual majors. That means that they major in elementary education and they have a liberal arts major. And we kind of guide them to certain areas. Sometimes we allow them to kind of have a little freedom, but that gives them a little more content and also connection to some other courses, course offerings, some of those things that broaden their knowledge. In addition to that, we require 2 math courses that are specific for our elementary ed students to build that content. We also guide them when it comes to our ISP, because we have our general ed curriculum is an ISP, the Integrative Studies Program, where they have to take courses in the IA, which is arts, IH, which is humanities, IN, which is natural science, and IS, which is social science. And then the last one is integrated studies. So a lot of times we'll guide them as they're choosing courses. For example, a great IH is one of the history courses that we recommend to our students because it also helps prepare them for the Praxis 2 multi-subject tests. And there's a bunch of other courses, like in IN, there's a phenomenal science course that the students really enjoy. So we try to guide them in courses that we think would benefit them as they continue on in education. In addition to that, we have set up our methods where elementary methods 1 is kind of an integrated, it's 8 credits where it's a mixture of content, pedagogy, and time in the field. And methods 1 focuses on literacy and on social studies. And our methods 2 focuses on math and science. So they get another chance where they're taking the content that they've learned, learning how to teach it, and then applying it in the schools that they're placed. And then we have lesson plans that go beyond that. And I should also add, I know literacy is not considered maybe a content area, but we do have a course that they take in that before they enter Methods 1. Because if we didn't, then the entire Methods 1 would just be about literacy, and we don't want to shortchange the social studies piece in that course. So, I mean, that's kind of a quick overview of what our students do, but imagine that second liberal arts, that's another 36 to 44 credits in another content area that they're taking. We also encourage our students to choose as their liberal arts the English, one of the social studies, or math, or sciences, because it also opens them up to the opportunity when they finish, they could switch from a K6 licensure to a K8 with those specific liberal arts. Does that answer? Is there anything? It's like the quick overview.
Are there any questions regarding that to where we are right now? Yeah, okay, Brian.
I should have gone first. So Plymouth State University, some similarities to what happens at Keene. So a few things, especially elementary education. So we have a K6 and K8 pathway. So first to clarify that piece, the big difference between K6 and K8 is the K8 pathway requires an additional 15 credits to meet that. That's what's outlined by the New Hampshire 612s. All right, so any student that's doing 16 is doing K8 has to have kind of like that content specialty area. All right, in addition to passing the Praxis 2 in that content area for what they're doing. Then across the board, I'm thinking about the K6 piece, this breakdown between content and pedagogy. We try to make sure our students have elementary ed, they have multiple math classes geared towards that. There are literacy courses as well that focuses on the content piece. And then integrated into that is the science and the social studies piece as well. Similar to, we also have, with the content piece, try to ensure that the students, through the general education program, which is 42 to 47 credits, that they are taking certain classes as well. All right, they're going to really build up their content knowledge for the teaching and what's expected to be taught in a history classroom or science classroom is 4th, 5th, 6th grade, really K through 6 as well. Because, as you said, is if you don't have the content, it's really hard to teach it. All right. One of the things that's really become important as part of it is that our students, when they are in their clinical experiences, and they start having clinical experiences as their first year, right? We've really embedded that piece so that they are spending time in classrooms in K6 or K8 classrooms, and even some of them, this is just the elementary level, really getting a sense of what's happening in those classrooms. So start thinking about it, right? It's not just to wait until their final year. This early on. It starts simple, like a gradual progression. They're doing observation work, and then the expectations go up with each year as they continue. That last time being their junior year, the third year, they're implementing lesson plans and then getting ready. Our elementary education students do what we call a year-long internship, whereas in the fall, we want them to see the whole cycle of the school year. So in the fall, they're there for a practicum for 1 day a week plus 2 full weeks, and then they stay with that same teacher through the spring as well, so that they get an opportunity to see that whole scope and sequence in the classroom that they're placed in, going through. What we really make sure is we use the 612 standards, the content standards, to guide what we do, so that we make sure that our programs are aligned with the 612 standards for elementary education. And if you take a look at those there, since we're talking about social studies, they actually have them here, but they outline, they outline the 10 different themes and the different areas with social studies that it's expected, and we really make sure that our students have that they have that as much as possible in getting ready. I'll stop there. So,
Representative Myler?
Thank you for being here. I've got probably 3 questions. One is, what's the history of your enrollment in these programs prior to and current? Also, you indicated that the program development is aligned with the standards from the state. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And the final question is, how do you get feedback from the students who've gone through your program to ensure that the content and the development of your program is actually meeting the needs and is not an ivory tower approach to the education of potential teachers, but actually is meeting the actual needs as they're experiencing them in the field? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer the last one first and then remind me of the other 2. We do, and I know Plymouth does as well. We do CAPE accreditation. We do also a lot of program review. We both sit on the Council for Teacher Ed. So there's a lot of oversight on the ed prep programs at the state level. And then we do the national accreditation. It's another level. And the important thing about doing the national accreditation and part of CAPE is that it's not just getting surveys and focus and getting the feedback from the students in the program. Part of it is knowing where your students are going, evaluating the impact that they have on their classrooms, and doing surveys and focus groups with both completers and with employers, like those who have hired our students, to hear about the impact that they're having in the classrooms. And that's for all of our programs, not just for our elementary education programs. So there is a lot of oversight and constant kind of review. And this year, we just finished our CAPE and state approval this year. So one of the things that we're going to be spending our professional development, we do every year, but this is kind of a significant year because we just went through it, is to really look back and say, what are changes that we need to make based on what we hear or what we think improvements? And another piece of that is we have an educator preparation advisory committee. And that is where we meet. I set up meetings and we have representatives on that committee that are cooperating teachers, we have students, we have principals, we have superintendents, and the students are both our undergrad and our grad students, and some faculty representation where we bring things that we're kind of discussing to really, so for example, we're reviewing our clinical and disposition evaluations. Those are kind of those unit-wide evaluations. Do they have the skills of a teacher? Do they have the professional disposition? And we share it with them to get feedback. Once they've used it, does it make sense? Are there changes that need to be made? Does this reflect what's happening in the schools? And that's just a continuous part of the work that we do. And then I think you asked about the aligning with the 612s. Brian brought the matrices that the state sets up, but we have to, in all of our programs, this is for all of our programs and for our unit, we create crosswalks that reference the state standard. It references if we have any SPA, like specialized standards, the CAPE standards or whatever, accreditation, all those things across, and we align it with coursework, with assignments, with key assessments, so that we know where we are meeting all of those elements that are covered in the state standards. And we do it by specific programs and then the professional standards as well. And then I think the last question was, do you want to add to that before you go into enrollment? And then enrollment trends across the state or across the country. Numbers in ed prep have gone down. I would say the biggest dip we saw kind of was during COVID, but one of the things we've noticed since then, the past 2 years, our numbers have started going up slightly. I would say our elementary major about 10 years ago, it was so large that about half our graduates wouldn't even find jobs. Now we're at the point where our graduating class this year, most of them already have job offers. Our numbers have become to a healthy level where they are finding jobs as they leave. But our elementary ed, which is always the largest program, it is growing. The secondary, we've been kind of consistent. It's dropped a little. Our English and our social studies tend to stay healthy. Our math and our science are the ones that fluctuate. And I will be honest that because of our numbers in the science and the amount of work it takes to do, that was the one that was put on hold by the institution, not by something I want to do. And I would love to bring it back. But science, which is a critical shortage, it is hard. And that's something we can talk about in the teacher shortage, like that recruitment piece, or how do we get more students in teacher ed? But does that answer all three? Thank you.
Other questions from Representative Luno?
Yeah, thanks very much, Rick. And Tanya, I want to sort of poke on something that you just noted when answering some of Mel's questions, but they said, what changes do we need to make based on what we're hearing? And I want to sort of tie that back to what Rick was saying. I'm sorry, I'm being sort of just, easygoing here.
It's Friday.
It's Friday, yeah. It's Friday and it's ADF. But tie back to what Rick said at the top of the meeting, which I think it sort of went to, over the last decade, we've seen a decline in student performance in math skills, and I guess I'm just taking it at face value right now, because I'm not looking at any information in front of me on it. But have you been able to identify whether that lack of student outcomes is tied to, foundational math, advanced math, and then what are the causes of it addressed by improved instruction or improved curriculum or some combination of both? And what are you finding, and how is that feeding back into the sort of what we're hearing and what changes we need to make?
So I think the thing is that in schools today, it's hard because it's not just about academics. I think teachers today have to wear many hats. And I think a lot of the social, emotional, the mental health, and all these other pieces in COVID take an impact on their ability to kind of, because they have to focus on those pieces to get to the academics. So I think there's a lot more factors that come into play when you look into the test scores when it comes to math. I would say that I think teachers are amazing and are doing the best that they can, but some of it is more than just their training. It's not about that. It's about all the other factors coming in and making sure that they have the resources. But I think another piece is that we train, and I'm speaking, Brian, for you, too. We teach our teachers not only the content, but the pedagogy and the lesson planning and knowing your students and how to create lessons and how to engage them. And a lot of schools rely on box curriculums. And that is sometimes limiting to these teachers that have been trained to really meet the needs of students and create lessons that would engage them and challenge them, meet them where they are, differentiate. So I think that is something that is not about what we do, but something that is a larger discussion to have. And we do take the feedback that they say about the you know, what's happening in the schools and some of those things. But one of the things that I noticed, and this is me speaking for our program, is about 7-8 years ago, we used to have a math, like pre-math test to get into the first math course for our ed. And I noticed the number of our students that would fight and avoid taking it and delay it and cause them to, either not do well or then be delayed in taking those math courses, which would affect their progression. So I met with the math department. I would talk to students about it, and they're like, oh, I hate math. I said, you're an ed teacher. You can't hate math. We all love math. But it created another barrier. And so we met with the math department, and we said, this math test is causing students to come in with this negative view of math before they even engage. So we removed that pre-math test. And so when our students come in now, they can take the Math 171 and Math 172 and take it. And it has changed the way our students see math. They are now doing better in getting through the math and progressing our program. They're also doing more successful in their attempts when it comes to taking the Praxis Core in math and the Praxis 2 in math, which wasn't before because now they don't have that barrier. And then the last thing was they were doing the successes of students in different various math courses, our IQL thing, and they realized that our students that did this Math 171, Math 172, a lot of students were not doing well in the psych research method, like the psych stats class that they had. But they realized that the most successful students in those courses were the elementary ed students because they had the 2 math classes before, and they ended up doing really well in that. So our students have started to change the way that they see and they engage in math. And I think those are things that sometimes we have to realize that the way we teach or the tests that we put on students create barriers to them. And I think that's where the feedback came into play and started changing the culture.
So, and just a quick follow-up on that. And so you've removed that barrier. Your students in the teacher training programs have now enter these math programs without sort of the anxiety of having to take a high pressure test beforehand. And how has that then changed their attitudes towards, or their feeling towards math, and how they project that on kids they're young students that they eventually are in front of?
We have heard a lot less of students saying, oh my God, I don't want to do this math, or I don't like this math. And I will also say our math department has done a really good job that the people who teach it are either teachers themselves or in our secondary ed. So they're really helping students enjoy and understand the concept. So a lot of them actually leave the math class saying, I actually understand this. So it's really changed. We see a lot less negativity towards math. And I also remind students, I was a special educator, and I was somebody who, I liked math. I got math. But when I went to teach special ed in high school, they said, what do you want to teach? And I didn't want to teach math because I understood math. I wanted to teach the English because it was where students said, well, I didn't get this. I'd be like, oh, I understand. Let's go through this. Let's break this down. So I also try to remind the students, sometimes what you think is a struggle becomes your superpower as a teacher. And so we've changed the conversations that we have with students who are going into teacher ed to change that mindset and to really enjoy and realize that being an elementary ed teacher specifically, you have to enjoy and engage in all the content. And I think that's one of the reasons that we switched to that integrated of really kind of allowing them to spend more time on that concept and practicing and enjoying and being in the classroom for that.
A number of years ago, and Shannon and Mark, you might engage a little bit in this. We heard from the community college system. Now, this is going back to when Paul Leather was Deputy Commissioner of Education, that 60% of our kids coming out of high school going on to the community college system. And I never got that from the college presidents because they said, we don't have remedial code. We start right out of the gate. But Shannon, you were very honest saying that of those 60%, requiring some kind of now we don't want to use the term remedial. I know you've changed the game a little bit, but of those 60%, 50% never graduated with an associate's due to the fact that it was math. And so evidently we weren't sending students to higher ed well prepared in that subject area. And so you were having to do the job of maybe what perhaps K through 12 should have been doing.
I mean,
And-
we could give data on that, just our, practice course scores. Like our students, like we look at practice course score data, which is basically a test based on 8th through 10th grade high school. And then students that our pass rates, like it takes some students multiple times to pass this test. The stuff that would be considered remedial work or things, it's based on, what should have already been taught, what they should have had coming in.
So how are we communicating that down to the high schools and to the local school districts that we're having this issue? And I don't know whether it's getting better with what you're doing, Shannon, or not.
Well, as you know, we have moved from the kind of old model of remedial education into what we call co-requisite remediation for math and English where that's needed. And that's putting the students directly into a college credit math course, but giving them specific supports they need in areas where they're not, where they're maybe not prepared. And that has improved the outcomes for those students in terms of the students that go on, that persist and go on to graduate. So once they get to us, that's what we're doing to kind of improve their outcomes. As you know, we used to have a program called the Math Learning Communities, which was a partnership with the high schools that helped to embed competencies within high school math that would prepare students before they left high school for college level math. And thanks to, there's funding currently in House Bill 2 now to revive that program, which, we certainly consider is very
So
promising.
the numbers coming to you, Shannon, that you're still having these students coming from secondary education to you that need the co-requisite type instruction?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are still students coming to us that need that co-requisite support. Yes.
Okay. Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things with regard to your enrollment. What's the percentage of men that are in the enrollment?
Because I don't have that data, but it's more balanced in our secondary, our music and our PE. Our elementary still is predominantly female, but we are getting more males that are coming into elementary education. So, and when they do come, we're like, please stay.
Sure.
So, I don't have the exact numbers,
Right.
but it's still consistent. I don't know if the same for you.
Same thing. We see more men in social studies, in physical education,
Right.
health education, less so. Though in this year's cohort, I think out of 30 something, we have 5 males there. So, and we always try because I was a male elementary school teacher too. So, but we do try to pair them up with other male. We try to support that and try to encourage that as much as possible because I think it's really important to have as much as possible in school.
Further question? Sure. Sorry. In the past, Keene State has had an association with the Parker Varney School. I represent that area. Is that still in existence?
Well, we have different levels of partnership. So usually the partnership schools we have presently, and this is especially, I said right before, like around COVID, a lot of the partnership schools are in the Monadnock region, but we do a lot of outreach, especially with our students and student teaching. If some of them need to, we have had students in the Manchester area, we've had in Londonderry, we've had up to Concord. A lot of times we base it on supporting the student if they need to live at home, and then our faculty will travel to do the observations at those schools. I do know that Steve Bagay does a lot of outreach and partnership work. He's our grad coordinator in the Varney School and some of those in Manchester.
Okay. Do you have anything with us?
Yes, actually, we have a wonderful partnership with Northwest Elementary School.
Right.
Shelley, the principal there, is fantastic. And it varies how many interns we have there or clinical experiences, but we've been working with them probably for the past 5 years now, and it's been a great experience for our students in the school, and also working with that school.
Northwest is a very successful school. Bobby Duclos was the principal there. He was one of my students when he was in high school. And one for I have 8 minority schools in the district that I represent. Hispanic and Black represent the majority of students in those schools. How do you face that in terms of your preparation, knowing that things are different?
I think what we try to do is give our students a wide range of field experiences, which is why they start so early. So we have Manchester. We don't work as much in Manchester because it's over an hour for a student to get there, and transportation issues are the challenge with that. But what we've tried to do is that we try to prepare our students. We work in a wide range. We work in the Franklin School District, which has some challenges. We work with Laconia. We work right in our backyard, SAU 48. And our goal is to have students working in a variety of different environments to help prepare them, embedding those clinical experiences and then tying them together with what they do in the coursework. Our faculty members spend time at schools as well. And I think what we're really trying to do, some of the earlier questions I heard was we want there to be that connection to what they're happening in schools is connected to what they are preparing in that coursework at Plymouth.
Okay. And I would say for us that we do give multiple experiences, and we're very cognizant of grade levels and experiences, middle, high school, to give a variety, but Monadnock region doesn't have the same level of diversity.
Sure.
But if it was up to me, I keep joking with the school. I said I would love to get a bus and train someone to be a bus driver, so our students could make those connections and experiences. And if we have students at the student teaching who want to be placed in some of those schools, we happily support those endeavors. We did get a couple, we are just in the midst of a search. We had a donor a couple years ago that wanted to bring some more urban experience for Keene State. So we've been searching for a candidate that can come for 2 years that will bring recent urban experience and to Keene State College to bring that to all of our students, but also in hopes that it will make connections so our students can start going and spending time in some of the schools in the region as well.
Okay. And my last question is, we now have social workers in our elementary schools, but particularly Northwest, which is, as you know, there's great variety at Northwest, but Northwest, Parkavani, Gosselin, you go right through the situation. And these social workers are very busy. And I think the poor classroom teacher has to deal with these situations. And our kids are 80, sometimes 90% free, reduced price lunch. So, the economic environment they're coming from. How do your people handle that kind of a situation? How do you prep them for it, in other words?
Well, it's interesting because we have schools in Keene. One of the elementary schools has two of them, over 80% low SES free reduced lunch. So some of the especially the economic diversity is relevant. We also have students, and one of our Methods 1 partnerships is with Hinsdale, and I don't know if you know Hinsdale, but it's rural and yeah, that's right. And so they're going into the other. It's like it's like the complete opposite, but it has a lot of the low SES, transportation, some of those. So the part of our job is to not only just put them in the schools, and I know you do this as well, is that we really think it's important that our students understand the community that they're working with and all the things that are coming into it. And then by having two different, so we might have a Methods 1 in Hinsdale and Methods 2, the students might be up in Keene, which is a very different dynamic, financial support by schools, SAU structure, all those things are very different for the students to kind of tease and experience.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Representative Mylan?
Yeah, as a follow-up to Lou's question, what's the diversity makeup of your student population who are becoming teachers?
I would say our biggest diversity is the fact that Keene State's been for a long time over 40% first generation college students. So we have a lot of students that they are the first and navigating that piece. We also, and these aren't all documented, you know, they don't always like to go to the Office of Disabilities, but we tend to have over 40% of students that have disabilities also come to Keene State. So we do have a lot of diversity. And there's, if you come and actually, I don't have the demographics, but if you went on our website, I know our fact book always presents it. They have been doing a lot more outreach to bring more diversity to Keene State because it is needed to represent what is beyond just the Monadnock region. So, and with that, we are very active, and I know I'm speaking, I'm saying me, but I know we do it, you do the same thing. That is why faculty, we're always there on, you know, open house days, admitted student days, when students come to tour, because that is a way to kind of expand that diversity when families come to visit.
Many of what you just commented on, but I think at the end of the day, our students who are preparing to become teachers would probably identify as white or Caucasian.
Yeah.
Very high numbers.
Yeah, on that, I think it's important to note that because our population is becoming much more diverse. And it's not just in Manchester or Nashua. And so that would be a concern that I have. I know I deal with City Year in Manchester, and they have a very diverse core member, and the superintendent there is always trying to hire some of those students after they finish their core experience to be teachers there in Manchester. So I would just encourage you to do whatever you can to have a greater diversity from a minority standpoint in your student population, because we need those, and kids need to see those people who look like them teaching them.
We agree.
I'd like to get onto just a little slightly different topic. When we had a bill in here the other day, and it's SB 216, we were talking about civics education, and we got into other areas of the social studies as well. And one of the questions which was asked, and this happened to be asked of Megan Tuttle, who is the president of NEA. And her children, in fact, are in public school right now. And we were talking about, what do we usually do in social studies at the 4th grade level in this state? I know in Maine, it was always Maine studies. And here it's New Hampshire studies as well. But what Megan said to me was kind of, you know, it didn't surprise me. It was that, well, their New Hampshire studies program is probably going to be the visit to the Capitol building, period. That's it. No more, no, and no less. That's it. I'm really a little bit concerned now. And another thing that came up in that conversation was that we're assessing on the statewide assessment, reading, writing, mathematics, language arts area, and science, not every year. Social studies is not assessed at all. So I guess one way of saying it, what takes the back seat in the car? You're not going to be measured on this subject. You're not going to be held accountable for this subject. What do we do to ensure that, and I'm getting slightly into this area of social studies, what can we do to ensure that it's taught? And I know that you're higher education, and are you, so from the teacher prep side, are you teaching and teaching that content about New Hampshire, about our civics, about our, you know, geography, etc. And you mentioned earlier that there's a number, if you're K through 8, you have to number other credits, subject areas. I'm just concerned that are we employing teachers that have the, I know they're coming back in in education, and they're finding that there's this book that says, here's our curriculum, if they even have a book anymore. And that's it. It's already established. So you have to teach. And I also understand all the other issues. We have a lot of mental health issues going on, a lot of time being absorbed. It's got to come from something. A school day, 5.5 hours of instruction. That's it. At max, you have recesses in there too, and others. So where should we go? You know, when we know it's not being taught.
I don't know. I'll just share anecdotally. we find, so in preparing our teachers to be K through 6 teachers or K-8 in their internship placements and their clinical placements, I would just concur with you that our students have fewer opportunities to teach science and social studies in those classrooms. Unfortunately, I think you're right, is that a lot of schools that I've visited and spent time with but you see more schools pushing reading, pushing math, extended times at the expense of social studies and or science being taught. This is anecdotally, but so I don't have an answer for you, but just to say, I think what then though, in terms of our, even as students, as we prepare them, we're a big believer that the clinical, I think like anything, by practicing is how you get better, right? But if you have fewer opportunities because you see it, less. So I think it is something that I don't have the magic answer to it, but it definitely, we've seen that.
And anecdotally, it's interesting because, and Keenan, I can speak for Keen, my children participated. In third grade, they do a lot with the Keen. And they have a day where and I get to see it outside my office, where all the third grades are visiting and they're walking around downtown. They're visiting Wyman Way and they're going here and there. They come have lunch in the dining hall. And so they have it and you see it and the students are enriched with it. And it was interesting. I was talking to a teacher last year and I said, if you need help, we have students. They will happily walk. So we're talking about plans of getting our students to help support that and to have, that they get to experience it as well. And on the other side of it, I have a son in 9th grade right now. And he's taking a street law class, right, at the high school. And at first I was, it's an elective, and he is loving it and the things that he is learning. So I think that there's opportunities and I think there's want, but I think the stress of trying, the testing, you have to meet this in literacy and this in math, and this is your school's going to be judged, and it puts a stress that causes science and social studies to be pushed on the side. But if you think about it, and I was reading through the bill, there's a lot of ways that we can include even the civic and education that is part of the social emotional. Let's talk about community. How do we create a community? How do we structure it? How do we listen to all voices? That is also part of social emotional learning. So I think that there's things that could be done. And I do know, and I know that, we do in our programs, we teach our students what they need to do. I can tell you specifically in our social studies ed, our secondary program, they do a lot in preparation. There's a reason why they don't have to just major in history. They can major in sociology or political science and all those, because those come in, but they still take courses to meet the competency. But one of the things that our students can major in is Holocaust and genocide studies, not only for our secondary social studies, they can do that as their liberal arts, but our elementary ed. And those allow them to learn this content and ways of teaching and engaging and stuff that they can bring into the classroom. So I think we are doing the preparation piece and we're just teaching them how, but I think that part of it is entering a school. There's also all those other things that they're coming into conflict with. But I will say I was meeting with the student yesterday. I was telling him, I was meeting about our courses for next year, but she was telling me that she had just gotten back from Hinsdale and she taught a lesson on the 3 branches of government. She was in a 4th grade class and I was like, okay, look, they are teaching some social studies. But I think also having our students in there because they have to teach so many literacy and so many social studies, in a way it infuses it into the schools and maybe it changes it,
I just thought it shouldn't have been. We're really trying to teach our students how to integrate. All right, how do you work together when you're integrating? Because given the limited amount of time, so a lot of how do you integrate your ELA and your social studies together, and really giving them those skills going forward. So that's being a big part. Recognizing the limited, I can't control what's in the school day and what's taught in the school day, but what we can control is make sure our teachers are prepared, our students are prepared to maximize that time when they're teaching and think about integrations across.
President Myler?
Where are you finding your teachers are going to teach? Are they going to teach in public schools, private schools, etc.? And the second question is, how long do they stay there? Are you finding after the fifth year, second year, they find this is not what I want to do as a profession for a number of different reasons. So the issue of the fallout,
Yeah, so-
once they start their career, what happens?
What's interesting is that one of the things we did with our survey, we do a completer survey. And as I mentioned with CAPE, it's like 5 years. And one of the things that we ask our student is, are you currently teaching in the area that you are licensed in our program? And are you teaching private or public? And I would say most are still teaching, but some of them may not be teaching, like we might have had an L-Ed that did special ed and now they're doing special ed, but not L-Ed, some of those pieces. But I would say less than that, but I don't think, and I was at the teacher shortage last year, or last fall. A lot of them aren't staying in New Hampshire unless they're from New Hampshire, and it's because of the costs. They have loans. A lot of them are going home to live at home, to start working. They have connections in schools. And we have, for example, we have a graduate of ours. She's taught now in Swansea, which is right next to Keene, for 3 years. This is her third year. She came straight out of our elementary ed, has been teaching L-Ed in the place that she did her methods 1, and then her student teaching. So she stayed. She's leaving because she can't afford to pay her apartment anymore because housing, she's not being paid enough to be able to live in the area too. So she's going back home so that she can live with her boyfriend. It shares costs. So these are factors that affect them. And I even said to the last fall, I said, I would love, you guys are always welcome. I know they come talk to our students and ask them. I mean, it's really fascinating to ask them, like, what is it that you're going to do or what are your plans? But most of them, I will say, want to do public school because that's what they're trained in and that's what we have them, in all their placements are public schools.
We find about 50% of our students stay in New Hampshire. 50%.
How many are in a class?
So
you
a
said
number of
30 or-
completers, sure. So I'm gonna go undergraduate. So if I'm gonna stay just undergraduate per student, we'll probably run 100 to 110 completers each year. Academic
That's an education.
That is in the teacher certification program, social studies, elementary ed, right around there. Special education. So it's about 50% stay in New Hampshire, 50% leave. So you're already looking at that number. That's here at Plymouth. And then I think those are great questions you're asking, and we're trying to follow those. I think one, if I could, our research, our data is based on 2 things: surveys with students and the New Hampshire Department of Education Educator Search database. If I could make a plug for something, I think this would be something that would be great, that maybe IHEs could partner with the Department of Education to get the data even better, because if individuals change names or, it's easy to lose some of that, because I think these are really important questions. How, 2 years later, are they still teaching? 3 years? And I will tell you, I see a smaller trickle of folks that are finishing their student teaching be like, I don't want to teach. They did a good job, but just decide right now, I don't want to do this. And I think, and I can't give you concrete numbers, and we're trying to measure this too. And I think this is helpful because nationwide teacher shortage trends is looking at this. It used to be that typically you knew someone's going to become a teacher, you had 3 to 5 years before they might bail. Now they're talking about 1 to 2 years they're bailing out. And I think that would be really fascinating, not just at Plymouth, but I think, across the whole, if, and I'd be happy to work with the Department of Education on this, to figure out, it's like, okay, how many individuals are getting New Hampshire teaching license and then quit in, 1 year later or 2 years later? And then if you really want to put a spotlight, because I can say, those folks that are quitting, what were they doing? Are they graduating from a New Hampshire school? Are they graduating from a state site-based licensing plan? Are they graduating from out of state? You know what I mean? Like, start looking at those different factors. But that's a lot of time. But I think that starts, I think to get the answers to things, I think you have to have data that really is painting an accurate picture, not just anecdotally. But I don't know what happens going forward, because I've definitely seen the past couple of years, like with COVID, different things, definitely a number starting to trickle up who are just saying that they're not going into teaching after graduating. Whether that's going to subside again or keep going, that's a really important question to answer.
Where do they come from? How many are out-of-state students? How many are in-state students when they start as freshmen? What percentage?
In the education programs?
Yes.
I I don't want to speak. I'd have to go look at that data exactly. I think
I was gonna say about half are New Hampshire. We get a lot from Connecticut.
Yeah.
Do you get a lot from Connecticut?
no, we get a lot from Massachusetts.
We get some from Mass, but we get a ton from, like, Connecticut's a big one. Some from Maine, some from Mass, and some from New York. But I would say the biggest pockets are New Hampshire and Connecticut.
So if you have approximately 50% coming in, but 50% leaving, it kind of balances, doesn't it?
It does.
Oh, no.
It does balance.
It does, but it's, I do feel like that there's a lot, like SAU 29, which is a huge SAU right there in the Monadnock region. They're always like, oh, but we want your students to stay and stay in Keene. And I was like, I would love them to, but they're not staying there because our number from that area is lower. They're coming from other areas in New Hampshire. So yes, they're going back to those areas in New Hampshire, but it may not support the Monadnock region as much. I have noticed though, our students who are doing our 1-year special ed masters, because they're 1 year employed in the school, those students, we tend to have a higher percentage staying after graduation, but I think it's because they're employed and they're kind of become invested in the community a little bit more, so.
Dave?
Thanks, Rick. And the question I'm going to ask is it's not a political question, but I think it's appropriate given where we are in the discussion. But I'm wondering how your teacher training programs have adapted to the relatively new New Hampshire banned concepts law.
You mean the divisive concepts?
Correct. Yeah.
We teach our students about it and empower them to know how to navigate it. And I would say specifically our social studies ed, and ironically, I should have brought my faculty member from that. He does a lot on that because the social studies tends to be the area where that would come into play. I think there's just a lot of stress on teachers in the schools. They feel that they are being watched. I think our student teachers have said that they're like, can I do this? Can I do that? And it's just navigating, reminding them that, you know, it's about the facts and this is what the law says. We've also had professional development. We have the Southwest Center. They've done a lot of webinars where they've brought in lawyers, or Dottie Morris has talked about it, or, you know, we have speakers that support not just our students, but also the community, and that teachers, we offered them last year for free, just so teachers and principals and superintendents could engage in it and be able to ask questions. So yeah, does that answer?
Right. So I guess what I'm hearing is that yes, the programs have adapted.
Yes.
In light of this change in law, and yeah, I mean, I think that's it. And then do your students have like sort of a clear understanding of where those, you know, where the edge of the road is on this? Because I hear that that's a sort of a common concern.
Well, I think it is. I think that I think we're clear about where the edge is and what they can and can't do. But I think that students feel concerned, like, can I do this, or can I say that, or, you know what I mean? That because their intent, they're taught, and it's interesting that we were talking about civic engagement. You know, they're taught all these ways to bring in books, especially for young children, and all these activities. And now they're going in and they're like, is this okay to do? Even though it's good teaching. And it is okay to do, but it's made them kind of self-aware. And I think that they're getting it not so much from our end, but from when they're in the schools. You know, we even had a property teacher was like, no, you need to give me your lesson plan 3 weeks in advance, and I need to post it. And the student's like, wait, 3 weeks in advance? You know, I can't do that. I'm a method student. So I think sometimes, I don't know, I think the politics of it sometimes get in the way of the best practices of teaching. Is that a good way of saying?
Can I talk for a second about integrating or embedding content into another subject area or skills and knowledge? That's a concept or a process, a teaching method that's been around for years. We had thematic reading programs where you bring in historical fiction into the reading program, and it was quite effective. Do you, in your higher education teacher prep programs, teach how to embed, where to embed, and give suggestions as to how to do it? I see that's part of the civics bill here in the elementary schools, and sometimes I think that's a little scary in the fact that, and I'm an advocate of doing it, but it's also a way of saying there's not going to be any accountability for it either. And it's just not going to be taught. Whereas if there's a course, like we do at the high school level, there's a course in it that's going to be taught, hopefully. But when you say embed it, it becomes part of that language arts reading class. And if you have a person that's a reading language arts person, perhaps they don't, that's not willing to embed a social studies concept into that class, then it's not going to be taught. So how do we prepare teachers to go ahead and embed and integrate properly?
So for elementary education, what we're actually doing is our faculty are modeling that. We've actually adopted the program. They changed kind of the course sequence and what they're doing. So the faculty are team teaching and working together and showing how to embed at kind of they having a user integrated methods course where it's not just saying, oh, this is how you teach social studies, this is how you teach ELA. They're actually doing it all together so that they are modeling what needs to happen. The students are a part of that. And that then they can take that knowledge. This is while they're in that 1 year practicum, 1 year internship with the practicum in the fall. Then they have the opportunities to apply it while they're there. So you're right. There's no the best way I think is to model it, to the practice. You almost practice what we preach, and that's what we're focused on doing at the elementary ed level, so that our graduates are more prepared to go into a school situation where maybe the due to schedule and whatever out, they don't have as much time as you would like with some of these different, but how can they think, as just said, how can they work together to make sure that the students at all grade levels are having social studies and having science content.
Yeah. And I would just add to that by the model that Brian's talking about, that we also do too. We have the social studies and literature, the ELA, and then we have the science and math. But it also is another way that as these schools are, taking some of the science and math out, we're saying, no, look, if you put these together, you bring it in. Like, why would you separate math and science or, social study, bring these pieces in so that they get to see these concepts through multiple ways or lenses or any of those things. And that's where, social studies, think about, I had my daughter was telling me in sixth grade, like they had debates and then they did a vote and they did this democracy. And so it is all kind of, embedded in it. And it was actually, it was when she was in fifth grade, she's in sixth grade now. But they integrate it. And I think that you're seeing more and more teachers, and unfortunately, I think it's more like fourth, fifth grade that they do it. It needs to start lower. But I think that there are some really good teachers, and part of the things that we do in teacher prep is that we don't just say, oh, you want to volunteer to be a cooperating teacher? We don't do that. We also screen, because we want our students to be placed purposefully, that we are looking for teachers that have had the years and they're willing to embed and to work with our students to provide these examples as well.
Dave?
Along those lines, thanks, Rick. A very successful integration that actually we saw at NHTI was with mindful communications. It started out as I think as a program in English. Yeah. Right. And then was later integrated in with a lot of the engineering curriculum and others. And I've heard really strong things. And I was wondering if maybe Mark and Shannon could talk a little bit about that and whether or not that could also have positive results at the primary and secondary level too.
I don't know how much I can really talk about that in detail, but I think it started out as almost like I won't say professional development, but it's sort of an optional thing that students and faculty could look at, and has become something that they've integrated, I think, into our health programs too, where people will be healthcare practitioners working with others, which can be a stressful thing. So yeah, I think it's become a much more broadly used kind of concept and skill set.
Anything further?
And just wondering if that's something that might be considered at, in some of our, primary and secondary.
I think it, I do know like at Keene State and I'm sure Plymouth, there are mindfulness classes, we have meditation courses, we have yoga, we have all these things that we allow our college students to think about. But I do think it's interesting. I think for our elementary ed, and it's not exactly mindfulness, we teach our students responsive classroom, which is kind of, I guess, the elementary of creating that community and culture and taking that moment to settle in the morning and to connect with your peers and, get to know each other. So it's kind of that concept that we do teach. And it was interesting because I was at the SAU 29 Strategic Planning Committee last night. And we were talking about the social emotional learning, but it's really clear in the elementary, and then there's some pieces in the middle, and then it's like what happens at the high school, and even the principal said at the high school it's like either like the mental health like top tier or at the bottom where it's like, oh, okay, this is the high school. There's not much in the middle. So it's interesting to me that I almost wonder if it's not something to really consider more so for like the middle high school, where I think some of that is not stressed as much or included in the teaching practices. So it is interesting. Thank you.
Are all elementary teachers required to take a methods course in social studies?
Yes, they are. Both of our programs, though, do it as a larger methods where it has like social studies and something else, but it is, you have to have the methods, social studies, science, math, and literacy. So it is part of the standards to cover those.
So when did it change? When I went to school to get my elementary ticket, I teach a course in math, methods of math, methods of language arts, methods of cursive, methods of social studies, and science. They're all separate, and I think there was some repetition, of course, but the social studies I really remember because I got into some good content. I loved it.
And they do, and we do the integrated too, because what happens with our elementary specifically in Methods 1, they're out in the field. So Methods 1, because it's 8 credit, is 8 to noon, every Monday through Thursday. And they get 2 days of content, so 8 to noon, and 2 days in the field. So the goal is to really kind of balance that. They get that content piece that you're talking about, but they also get to have that like needed time where they're kind of extended time in the school to really kind of get to know it. And then when they get to Methods 2 and they're doing the science and math, they're in the schools either Monday or Wednesday from 8 to 3, and then their content's taught, and then they have like time in the beginning, but then they come to campus on Friday for a half day. So I think the reason for us we made the change is that we wanted to have more integration, more time in the school where they can make the connections, because it is hard if you just do social studies and you go to do a placement, they may not be teaching social studies when you have them in the school. So by having these extended allows them to kind of see several things being taught and teach throughout the day versus just for a smaller time. I don't know if it's similar.
We had exactly the setup you described for elementary education until about 2019 or 2020. We had a 3-credit course in each of those, so it was 12 credits total. Part of why we made that change was feedback, listening to feedback, what was happening from our alumni, listening to feedback, what was happening at schools is saying that if it was, we really had to focus on the integration of these. So that's why we made, so it's the same number of credit hours in the field, but now they just took this into an integrated methods course to say across the board, and say, still 12 credits total that they have. Now they're doing the content piece as well, but we're not just looking at social studies alone, because we're not looking at science alone. They're still learning how to teach those, but they're also really learning how can we embed these together in a good elementary school classroom. And that's our goal, and that's what we're trying to prepare them for. The challenge becomes is what setting they go into after they graduate from us, right? In terms of how much of the school curriculum is dictated, how much flexibility they have. Those are other pieces, the puzzle there. But we're trying as much as possible to prepare our students so that they are ready to integrate and teach all of those content areas in elementary education.
it generates some concern to me that years ago we had allocated so many minutes per week to be taught in certain subject areas. Yeah, that went by the boards, and I understand why. But it also, though, guaranteed that those courses were being taught. Now we don't have that, and I don't think there's any guarantee. And after hearing some people speak in hearings here, I'm not so sure that we are teaching social studies the way we should be teaching it. So the kids are coming knowledgeable and knowing New Mexico is not part of Mexico. So, well, Lou, you used to be a social studies teacher. You gotta support me on this. It's a different world. I know it.
I taught social studies at Kennett High School in Conway, New Hampshire, and then at Bishop Bradley High School in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's a different world. I mean, I don't want to take time because we get the other thing.
No,
but,
yeah.
I visit my schools. I visit every school in my district every year. And basically, I visit fourth grade classes because they're taking New Hampshire history. And the world is so different. One of the great problems, I think, is the constant changing of administrators. Principals are disappearing. At Parker Varney, we don't have a principal. We've had a principal on leave for 6 months at least. So what's going on in terms of the operation of the school? We got a great superintendent. I think she's working hard, but to get to the chairman's situation, it's a different world, and I think we have to adapt to the new world. I'm an old world guy. It's very hard to adapt to the new world, but you have to do it. That's why I think training is challenging, to say the least. Recruiting kids to get into the business is even more challenging. And I have I had 3 kids. None of them chose education as their, field of study. I just think you have your challenges. You have the enrollment challenge, getting kids in. Once they're in, retaining them, getting them to do the kind of teaching that makes a lot of sense in terms of a real educational experience. It's just it's a tough world. Yeah. It's challenging. I don't think I could do it today. I honestly believe that. Now, I teach at the college level. I teach at St. A's and so forth. But I don't know if I could go back to high school, given what's going on. Things got to improve. I mean, look at what happened at Portsmouth. I'm deviating, but look at what happened at Portsmouth yesterday. I got 2 grandchildren in school at Portsmouth. At 10 o'clock the night before, they called school off the next day because one of the kids wants to kill the assistant principal. What do you tell your kids about that situation? And they apprehend the kid who was the perpetrator of this, and so. But we never faced things like that. We did at Kennett High School when I was teaching. It's was the late bus going to be there to take the kids who were participating in athletics and give them their ride home at night? Different world, and you have your challenges, so I've got good luck. I've got grandchildren and still in school, and they're challenging. But one thing that one of my grandchildren got involved in is the Model UN, and that seems I thought that was great. He's only a 9th grader, so he's in that, and he's in the debating society. They have that going.
Where are they doing that now?
Portsmouth.
Oh, okay.
So I think those are things that enter the new world that help us.
Jay, do you want to take a little bit here and talk about the civics?
Thank you, Chairman. So I think we've got a internal message.
Ways and means. Ooh, we're not ways and means. Are you looking for education?
This is, I'm just looking, it's like all the way to 205 and 207.
I would suggest, all the offices are probably not lit up, but you go down the hallway, there's a smaller office. It's usually on either side, but you'll see an administrative assistant in there. Maybe can gear you towards ways and means, because this is education on this side. Ways and means are on the second floor. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I don't feel like
There was also something going on at the end of the hallway too, all the way at the end.
That's us, Rick.
21011?
Yeah. It's a deck.
Oh, that's a caucus. Okay, so you don't want to go in there.
Yeah. So thank you. I'm going to make a leap that the bill that Representative Ladd has shared with you is going to pass. There, hope springs eternal, and that civics education is something that the public is really interested in, students having greater exposure. So in looking, in the universe of what is available, there's a lot of course material out in the field where people have put together sequences of learning lessons. So I'm curious, with your teacher training programs, where there is this universe of materials, but perhaps unvetted, at least by teachers, and it's a little hard while you're flying the plane to read the instruction manual. Is it something that is within your curriculum to look into these modules that have been produced and to critique them and to have those kinds of discussions in a classroom, so that as students begin to go out into the field in this multidisciplinary kind of method of language arts and social studies, begin to then say, hey, look at this one. That they are become a little bit more of a subject matter expert and consultant to teachers, not just the sponges that we want them to be.
So thank you. I guess the first I want to be clear on our social studies. They do a lot with civic, like the grades 5 through 12, like the program, the social studies specific content who are becoming social studies. I don't think you're asking about that. It sounds like you want to know more about elementary education specifically.
And the bill is quite particular. What it's trying to do is fit into what the requirements currently are. We've got a high school requirement without a grade school lift to facts and knowledge. So this is trying to create that learning tree.
So I would, maybe personally, but even I know social studies faculty, they think this is a great idea, in terms of, because I think that's one of the struggles is how do you teach some of this content at 7th and 8th grade or 9th grade if they really haven't had it much prior to, right? So having civics, having that earlier on, so I think it's great, and I hope it does pass as going forward. And I think that it's something that at least for Plymouth, I think is happening with our elementary education program. But I think even with this, I think would just become another step in terms of even in implement it even more as possible, and then taking a look at the what is available. I can't speak. I could. Are not the subject matter content area for social studies at the elementary. That's a colleague, and she could speak more clearly or specifically to certain modules of what would be the best way to do it, and probably be happy to start vetting that as well.
I would just add to that that I always worry when there's modules and curriculums because you don't know who's creating them or who's putting them out there. But when I think of elementary, and and I read through the bill, and we had a great chance to talk about it, so it got me thinking about it. Is really at the elementary, it's not just only the content, but it's teaching skills. It's teaching students how to have conversations where you're listening to all the voices and not just saying what I think is right. It's teaching children how to be critical thinkers. It's teaching children how to do creative inquiry, to say, well, I wonder about this. How do I find and how do I know what I'm looking is actually a good source? It's teaching students that there's things that we hear from the community or on the news or from family, and that our job is to kind of figure out, is this what I believe, or do I just keep saying what I hear? And we do this, and if we start this in elementary, imagine how much easier it would be to have these conversations with students in college. But how do we teach students that when we decide things that we have to decide as a community, and why do votes and voices matter, and how does this play into the larger scheme, and then why is it important for me to make sure my voice is heard and not just sitting there saying, oh, why are they doing this? I think there's a lot of skills that we could teach students at the elementary level that would really prepare them, not just in the content, but being able to engage with these courses when they are, and especially specifically, what you're talking about here for middle and high school, then they are mature enough and understand the world a little bit more, and they're ready to engage in those, that learning process. Those are things that I don't always think modules think about. And I even had a student, I was teaching the literacy course, and she was like, I'm sorry to ask you a side question, but I had the student, he kept saying, bringing up, oh, Trump this, Trump that. And then the teacher responded and got in trouble with how she responded. And she said, what would you have done? I said, don't make it political. Why is politics brought, the political divide brought into the classroom? Let's talk about critical thinking. Let's talking about knowing your sources. Let's talking about, okay, you believe this and somebody believes that. Is one better than the other? No, but let's listen, and then we can learn. How do we create an open space where dialogue can happen? And she was like, oh, that would have been a much better approach. And so that's where those conversations happen. And if we can do it in teacher ed, imagine if they're the ones going in the classroom, what might happen in the classroom. And I think that's the only thing, I think the idea of civic education, I agree with you, is really important, because we're preparing global citizens. We're preparing students who are ready to enter the world, be part of the voice, have thoughts, know how to critically think, how to find the information. But to do it, we need to find ways that it's scaffolded so it's developmentally appropriate. Sorry, that was my teacher ed side.
Good. It's good to hear it. I made a few possible changes on this. I'd like to just kind of, if we could, because you're here, Jay, and I know you're very involved with this. Yes, he does. First of all, on page 1, we're talking about courses or course of instruction. And the old law, which we have, or the current law, says 1 credit or 1/2 credit in the 2 that we have. We have a 1 credit course instruction required for high school graduation in the United States and New Hampshire history, and a 1/2 credit course of instruction required for high school graduation in the United States and New Hampshire government and civics. The bill as it's constructed doesn't mention the word credit. It talks about a year or a half year. Are we wise in dropping out the credit requirement, which is, basically reflected in our education rules 306?
Well, I think you make a good observation. We do talk in terms of credits. We know that students have a graduation requirement. It's minimally 22 credits in order to graduate high school.
20.
And
maybe in other schools it's 22.
yeah, 20. There's one that has
24.
27.
Yeah. It's different all
But
over the state.
it's different around the state. But right, okay, 20. Anyway, I think that is the unit of measurement that 306 makes reference to. I understand why you change it.
Well, I'm not trying to change it, I'm trying to retain it. I don't want to see social studies disappear
Yeah.
from the graduation requirements.
Yes, and it ought to be a full credit.
Okay. Then I have a question down the bottom there where it says, on lines 35, 36, 37 on
Yeah.
page 1, dedicated class time for civics instruction. I put instruction there, either way, for civics in each elementary grade, which can be integrated with other subjects the way the bills come from the Senate. Should it be, shall be taught as part of social studies or integrated with other subjects? So it shall occur rather than can? We fight over little words here, but they mean a lot. Yeah. I felt more comfortable with saying it shall be done. You can't back off from it. The other areas are more, just Rick Ladd speaking, and that's, I'm just, but I put on line 3 on page 2, a half-year credit course of instruction in civics in high school required. That's the discussion we just had, so it doesn't change the intent of the bill at all.
I think.
The line 5 may, I don't know if this does or not, in this section, civics means a nonpartisan education program that addresses the following. And then you have those A through D, which, try to define what it means. Would it be a little bit sharper or, saying education program committed to the fundamental responsibilities and principles of American constitutional democracy that addresses the following? I don't know if that puts too much in there or it takes away. If it adds, deletes, it's offered for consideration. I'm not asking for somebody to respond right now, but if your thoughts are invited. And then on line 15, I was trying to recall what I've heard a little bit about some of the teaching in New Hampshire and civics and our government of New Hampshire, and appreciation for free speech and civil discourse using historical references such as, how many people know the first Constitution in America was right here in this state? It was the Pioneer Constitution of January 5, 1776. And it was really hotly debated down south where the Capitol was. And on line 21, where it says, a school district shall develop and offer the United States and New Hampshire. Now, we took out government and civics, but that came out from the first paragraph on page 1 there, under item 1, Roman 1, where we're talking about the history, and we're talking government and the constitutions of the United States and New Hampshire as part of that course. So I was curious to know whether we should be also on 1C, a school district shall develop and offer the United States and New Hampshire history, government, and constitution of the United States and New Hampshire 1-year credit course under paragraph 1. See, this reflects back to paragraph 1, and some of that never came forward. The history never came forward. So we took history out of the law totally, other than a regular course, which is in the first sentence there on 1. It took all that other meat out down below. Those are the only changes I put in. And basically to that at all. I think we need the bill, absolutely. I hope we can get it passed, but I'm just asking if there's any support or criticism or regarding some of those possible changes. And there will certainly come out of the Education Committee when we have that. But coming with higher education people here, I'd be curious to know any thoughts. Yes, Dave.
Rick, thanks. And I think a lot of your suggestions here have some merit to them, and I think worthy of discussion. I think the one that I'm not following so much is the one on page 1, line 25, because I think paragraph 1 there, Roman 1, really sort of sets everything up for these half credit and full credit courses that are talked about in subsequent paragraphs. And I think the way it reads in the bill now, there shall be given courses of instruction in the history of government. And then 1A, B, and C talk about those courses. Some are half credit courses, some are or half year courses, some are full year courses, but they're all courses. They're not all
Yeah.
full year courses.
Well, there's a lot of ways of teaching it too. You know, some schools do it through one course, some do it through several different courses.
Right, but
Some integrate it all together.
but the graduation requirement right now is a half credit course at the high school.
No, it's 1.5.
No, it's a half credit course in civics.
Well, I don't have, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I think that's a graduation requirement for civics.
Yes, it is.
A half credit.
Well, it's government and civics, isn't it?
It is.
It's government and civics. See, we have civics here, we're taking government out and putting it up in the other course, because government has to be taught.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So there's going to be a lot of discussion
Yeah.
on this, but thoughts? Yes,
Okay.
Dave?
I support this, but I want to ask a question of our field practitioners here. We come up with a lot of great ideas in this legislature. And then we pass them and we pass them down to those who have to implement this stuff. And so the question I guess I really have, it's a serious question, is that as you implement this kind of thing, it's one more issue that is given to folks like you to have to develop curriculum, et cetera. I mean, set this aside just for a moment, this issue. I mean, how do you respond to the great ideas that we generate here in this hallowed place? And then all of a sudden say, okay, do it. I mean, how do you receive this kind of stuff?
Well, thank you for bringing us here now. This helps that we get to be part of the discussion. I think the big thing that when I talk about things that are passed that impact us, it's when things are passed and they're not considered the financial implications of it. Because sometimes things are passed and then there's a financial burden that's put on either higher ed or students or something. Or, for example, this, like, is there going to be any financial burden put on schools to be able to implement this? I think knowing the way that our budgets and the finance are structured in the state, taking that into consideration is extremely helpful, because sometimes it's the financial burden that is the biggest barrier for us. Is that a good way of saying it? I mean, for this, the teaching of this, the implementing in higher ed, we're already doing a lot of this within our programs. I think when I think of the implications, I think more on the schools. And is there going to be assessments that are required? Is there going to be certain curriculum? What are things that are going to be put in schools that may create a barrier for this? So those are things that go through my mind. And one other thought, because you said something and it got me thinking, and I asked Brian, you have middle school as grade 6, 7, 8, but the licensure for social studies is 5 to 12. So, and some schools are K to 8, some are K to 4, and then 5 to 8. There's a lot of variability. So it would be interesting to ask schools what they consider middle grades.
Well, by statute, middle grades are anything from grade 4 through 8, possibly even 9.
To 9. So that's the reason.
And so, yes, there's a lot of, and it's different all over the state. It's just basically based on population, and a lot of geographic issues.
Yep. But I just things to mention. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could address a couple of the points. One, relative to professional development, it's one of the things that New Hampshire Civics is fully prepared to do, is use its professional development summer sessions to help teachers, you'll also notice the implementation date here is a year out, so it gives time for that PD, professional development, to take place. The second thought is that this was written by social studies teachers. So the point about the middle school and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is that that's when they introduce civics instruction into a history-like class. So it's their input to as to that's the age-appropriate grades to have that over those 3 years, the equivalent of a half-credit course or a semester-long instruction that could be spread out in several different courses over 3 years. The last thing is, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, and I appreciate your historic context for line 16, and I recall from both the Senate and the House hearings that the desire to want to start to add to the such as is that it's a limitless clause that so where do we stop with the such as's? But I understand why you would want to call reference to that historic note in New Hampshire's history, and but again, it's something that has come up in both hearings as to, well, let's add this, and why are we limiting civil rights debate to 50s and 60s? And I mean, you heard the comments in your hearing, and that's the weakness of trying to elucidate what the topics, what the historical references ought to be.
Yeah, I understand totally. We don't want to make a laundry list, and I agree. I was only trying to make sure we got New Hampshire in there somewhere. But the interesting part that I noticed is on the bill that, the sections which are maybe cost some time for professional development don't occur until July 2024, which is good. That's right on the last page there in line 6 through 8. Which is also good. But it'd also be good if the higher education could help us here. We've, and Shannon alluded to the Math Learning Communities program, which we have 38 high schools which are involved with that. And we put $200,000 into the budget in support of the support which we get from the community college system in providing professional training for teachers in the summer, where they come down to NHTI and wherever you're going to end up doing that, Shannon, with Beth. And teachers teach teachers. Those that are already involved with it, they teach. And here's how we can help those kids when they're in grades 11 and 12, after we gave them the next generation math Accuplacer test at the end of 10th grade to determine how they're functioning. Are they ready for Algebra 2 or not? Then we take them off and put them into a math foundations and then quantitative math, which prepares them for going to. It would be nice to have something similar in the area of civics.
I think it would be, and I would speak, I know that we do a Southwest Center, so we do the Monadnock, it's like the whole Southwest corner. And we do summer institutes with courses, and then we also do professional development. I would also assume Plymouth does it too for their region. I think if money was put into support, between UNH and Plymouth and us, I think we could cover some of those pieces in those areas and bring some experts in that could do some of that civic engagement.
Did you put in a special appropriation?
We put, it was for the Math Learning Communities, we did it with Beth Dorian and Shannon. We put $200,000 in there. That was the initial grant that Beth had received from the feds, was for $200,000. And we got 38 high schools participating in it. We ran out of grant money, and everything's still in statute, but there's no funding. We put that money. Why don't you add something in? And when it comes, it's in your bailiwick now. Put another 200 in there for civics, and then we can work with the two. whomever wants to help do that. Is there anything else? I think we've pretty much, I'm looking at this docket here, the agenda, what we had here. Do the praxis test, the last thing which we had on this agenda. If you're going to get certification in lower L, what praxis tests do you have to take? Lower elementary, K through 5, 6?
So the K to 6 licensure, they have Praxis 2 multi-subject tests, so they have to, and the Foundations of Reading test. So the multi-subject is language arts, math, social studies, and science, and the Foundations of Reading is the literacy test.
And the praxis.
Oh,
And
Praxis Core. That's to get into teacher ed as a Praxis Core. That's for all.
Are you comfortable using the praxis?
Well, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. Ironically, to today's conversation, the area for the Praxis 2 that students struggle with passing is the social studies. But it's not because of their knowledge and understanding. The Praxis 2 for social studies for LEd is the same content, the breadth and, the depth that is expected for the Praxis 2 for the social studies for K to 12. But they keep switching it, but it's not as big of a test. So our students were studying, it'll be on one area, and then they study that to retake it, and then it'll be a completely different test. So I think the test is a difficult one that they struggle with. But it's not because they don't know the social studies, it's trying to prepare for such a broad test that the Praxis 2 has.
Maybe they didn't have any social studies when they're in high school or elementary school. Like I'm hearing while they get their 4th grade New Hampshire history, one day a year when they visit this dome.
For somebody, because I sit there looking at the test and how do we prepare, and that's why we encourage them to take the history course. We found a history course that helped prepare them, but it is such a broad spectrum, and it's not the Praxis. ETS didn't go, oh, this is for elementary. What do they need to know for social studies? Nobody has stopped to say that it's so broad. I think if it was more focused into what they need to know for K to 6, licensure, I think the test would be. I don't think it would be as much of a struggle for students to pass.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss today? Before this group heads out, I'd like to know, what are we looking for to review next? I know we have to follow the bill which we passed, what was it, 1530, the associate's degree leading towards the junior year, finding out how that's working out, has there been any positive feedback, negative feedback? I'd like to know how that's working.
What was the, was there a report from this committee 2 years ago?
It was a bill. It was Representative Ford's bill.
No, I know that, but was there a report from this committee? And did this committee convene 2 years ago?
It was the Senate conducted that. I'd have to look. And going back, the last report I see, August 18th, 2021.
Okay, that would be 2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And that was, Senator Ward was chairing at that time, and that report's right here.
So we should probably look at that report, see if there's any, as homework, see if there's any action items that came
Well,
out of
the
that
big
report,
issue
too.
back then was dealing with the community, the merger. Remember the merger? And we had the subcommittee here where they're going to merge the two systems. And I'd be curious to know where we are on that too. Kathy Provincia would be the one to contact. Or Mark. Nothing, huh? I don't think we've gone anywhere on that.
Right.
I think the question you raised, Rick, about the matriculation from associate degree to the institution, I'd be interested to see where that is. How many students take advantage of that, and what's been the success of that program? Because I know as I've talked with people around the country, when I mentioned that agreement, it's very popular from a standpoint of we basically led part of the way in doing that. And
So let me ask, let's ask Tanya this question. So a kid's coming down from White Mountain Community College, has a 2-year ticket, and they want to become, get a 4-year degree from Keene State. Are you going to accept those credits, or what's the process you're going to take?
We don't accept all the credits. They have agreements. I do know that a lot of our programs create agreements with all the different community colleges, and they say take this or take that. I will say for Ed Prep, the difficult thing is because of all the data and the licensure requirements and our accreditation requirements, we will only accept credits in our 100 and 200 level courses. We do not accept transfer credits in our methods, practicum, and beyond.
So if they had taken an Ed Prep program at NHTI,
We take some of those, and usually we do an individual review, but we do actually have an agreement with them of if you take this, it's equivalent to this. But it's interesting because they take a bunch of courses, and some of them it doesn't always. I mean, it'd be nice at some point to be like, well, they do this and we do this. Like, is there something that meets in the middle? I am now working with a CTE for career and technical ed that's starting a behavior science program up in Claremont. And they actually asked us to come in earlier because they're starting to form it. And so I have a colleague that's going to be working with them so that they can look at the courses when they create it, how it directly aligns to what, our intro courses, so that it makes it a smoother transition for students when they come in. So some of those things are happening as well, but that's not for the community college.
You asked White Mountains Community College. Plymouth has been working a lot with
Yes.
White Mountains Community College to really smooth that pathway, especially I worked at the community college in a dual role prior to. So I think it's really important. We've been doing that outreach also with the Lakes Regions as well, community college, and really trying to smooth that pathway as much as possible. So yes, that's been a big part of our admissions program, and it will continue to be. So to try to remove barriers so that I agree students pay for the credits at the community college, and then we want, they can transfer in and then towards getting the 4-year degree.
And I would say I think a lot of the credits they transfer in tend to be to our general education program, the ISP. And I think that a lot of our liberal arts majors are much more flexible with the credits coming in. I see, she nodding her head over there. So I don't think it's as like you do this, you're in here. It's more looking at the programs, and they're each kind of program specific, if that makes sense.
I think that will be something we put on the docket, follow up to the bill which we passed, which was HB 1530. And we'll follow up on that one. Anything else we have to be looking at?
This one you're looking for?
well, I think Rick,
that.
the article you gave, we should spend some time talking about that.
Oh, this right here. Did everybody get a copy of this? It's out of the Wall Street Journal back on 2/3/23, so February 3rd. College doesn't need to take 4 years. It was written by a Mr. Wyatt, is Senior Executive Director for Statewide Online Education in the Utah System of Higher Education. And Mr. Guelezo is Director of the Initiative on Politics and Sportsmanship in Princeton University's James Madison program. And it's kind of an interesting article that, you take a lot of this gen ed stuff, and the stuff that you're really going to need is the stuff you're taking for your skill that you want to go out and work with in the career. So I think they're arguing here.
Well, as I briefly read that, I mean, the whole question is do we move to a higher education where you just deal with a bunch of badges that you're going to earn and certificates you're going to earn? And how do you deal with the liberal arts as far as, I'll give you an example. When I was reading this, I said, no, wait a second. I would know nothing about Mont Saint Michel and Chartres and the stained glasses in that cathedral had I not taken an art course, which I didn't want to take. But so, I mean, there is a question that I'd like to entertain with this committee about how do you deal with just that badges approach of just, I'm going to get this certificate, that certificate, vis-a-vis looking at a more of a liberal arts approach of maybe taking some stuff I really don't want to take, But when I take it, I find out, hey, there's something there that I didn't want. And I think that's what this is talking about. I think as I look at this article, that's what that's really talking about. What is a general education that a student ought to have before they start into the workforce, or we're just training them for the workforce? And then, by the way, I may get into that workforce, and that's not what I want to do.
And don't forget, if you're going to talk about civics education, it's in the liberal arts that you get the skills that help you critically think and be creative and to understand multiple cultures and perspectives and those things. So there is a value. And interesting enough, and I don't know if you could say this, that there are sometimes students that they're going through ed prep program, and some are like, oh, I'm ahead on credits. I want to do methods in sophomore year. And I'll look and I'll be like, that student's not ready. Maturity wise, there is a development that occurs through the 4 years. And both students, and I wasn't chair at the time, were like, oh no, just let them go on. Both of those students didn't finish the program. They struggled going into it. So it's a balance of being exposed and kind of engaging in things that you may not have and learning stuff about yourself, but also development that happens in college that needs to be appreciated.
I think this article is trying to capture the idea, and it says it in bold here. For many students, the standard bachelor's degree program has become a costly straitjacket.
That's another issue.
It's the cost. Maybe we want to talk about that.
I was going to mention.
But there's accrediting organizations well beyond New Hampshire that are going to be not with us. I worked with the Northwest Association of Schools and Colleges for a number of years. Pardon me? I got lots of copies of that.
We need to have a time for our next meeting.
Okay, when's a good time to meet?
We're doing the budget every day. So,
Well, I understand it only took you 8 minutes to do one of those bills that you sent to us here, so. So we were told. It took us about hours and days.
40 that we passed yesterday, that we enrolled yesterday, we passed it and enrolled it. This is the Sununu Center.
Oh, the Sununu Center, yeah.
So how about the 8th of May, which is a Monday?
An 8th of May. Is May 8th good? That's a Monday? Okay, that'd be great. So let's tentatively put down May 8th, 10 o'clock. And so we do have this. And those will be 2 items which are on the docket. The 2 + 2, or, pardon me?
That's for me.
Okay, let us know if May 8th is good, everybody. And if there's a conflict, we'll look for another date. So with that, motion to adjourn? All in favor? Good. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. Are you going to be waiting for the teacher shortage this afternoon?
Probably go get food and
Yeah,
then come back.
Are we here at 1 o'clock?
Yes, go but downstairs.
That's downstairs. And Ruth she chairs that. And Steve Appleby will be here as well. If you know Steve, you must know Dr. Appleby.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Good to see you again.
Thanks for all your work on the civics
Oh,
over there, and appreciate that.
Thanks, Rick.
Oh, thank you very much. Boy, it's getting hot in here, Because you got a short sleeve shirt on. I got a t-shirt on too. And the tie is coming off here.
Yeah.
yes.
I don't blame you.
Oh, yeah, that's right.